In his 1978 book, End Time, Smith predicted the generation of 1948 would be the last generation and that the world would end by 1981 at the latest. Quote, understanding of biblical prophecies, I am convinced that the Lord will come for his church before the end of 1981. He said he could be wrong, but continued in the same sentence that, quote, it's a deep conviction in my heart and all my plans are predicated upon that belief. Calvary Chapel held a New Year's Eve service in 1981 for their followers to wait for the end to occur in accordance with Smith's prediction. When the world failed to end, many disillusioned followers left the Calvary Chapel movement. And so that's 1981. And when someone's talking about the end of the world, it doesn't happen, that's a big deal. Let's look at Harold Camping in more recent history. That was a big deal, predicting the end of the world and that not happening. When Chuck Smith is doing that, why should he be held to any different standard than Benny Hinn or Harold Camping with this date setting? And continuing on the Trinity, somebody points out that in 1997, May 18th, 1997, quote, Pastor Chuck Smith defended his unusual view of the Incarnation. In Smith's unique view, Jesus set aside his deity when he became a man and will rejoin the Trinity at some point in time in the future. And I'm going to quote Chuck Smith, quote, the Father was not put in subject to the Son, but the Son willingly to the Father. Now when this purpose is accomplished, then Jesus will once again take his place in the triune Godhead, and no longer will be that position a little lower than the angels, but now returned in the glory, and as he prayed, Father, glorify me with the glory I had with thee before the world ever was, when God said, let us make man our image and after our likeness. And so that's the way that things are going to progress until there's just one God, the triune God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit ruling over the universe. All things then in subjection to him, that God may be all in all. And this page continues, what's the truth? Jesus has never left the triune Godhead. Colossians 2:9, for in him dwelleth all the fullness of the Godhead bodily. And so that was 1997, altering the nature of Jesus Christ to be teaching a Jesus Christ that contradicts the Bible, not the biblical Jesus Christ, not the biblical Godhead, which in the biblical Jesus Christ, in him dwells all the fullness of the Godhead bodily. So that's some major confusion there, to be teaching an unbiblical false Jesus Christ. It's not a minor matter, and apparently at a later point he was corrected on this, and there have been some revisions to Calvary Chapel's doctrinal statements, I suppose trying to correct this. Now whether it has been corrected or not, nevertheless this is a rather major area to be teaching an unbiblical, contradicting the Bible, Jesus Christ, and to go against the Nicene Creed and Orthodoxy and essential doctrines of the Christian faith, to teach falsely against the biblically understood nature of Jesus Christ. Calvary Chapel may claim to have Protestant theology in many ways, but you don't see Protestants tinkering and playing around with these sorts of established essential doctrines of the Bible, of Christian beliefs as are taught in the Bible. Continuing on, there are some worse problems, things that are even really more disturbing. So Chuck Smith's view of the resurrection. Quoting some from calvarychapel.pbworks.com, quote, Chuck Smith teaches that the body is not raised but replaced with a different body. Smith also denies the physicality of the resurrection body. The following sections will show from Chuck Smith's own words that he consciously rejects the historical and biblical doctrine of the resurrection. And they do have some audio clips, and I found some more as well from Chuck Smith's sermons. As far as I can tell, this claim is correct. It's not a mistake. I'm not making it up. The Bible teaches that Jesus Christ died and then was resurrected to life, and as a man he had a physical body. He was born of a Virgin Mary, conceived by the Holy Spirit, and when he died, that physical body was changed directly to become his resurrection body. However, it was his physical body, like we all have, that was changed to be different after the resurrection, but Jesus Christ definitely did not get a second new body. And the Bible also states, as Paul says, we will not all sleep, but we will all be changed in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trumpet. For the trumpet will sound, and the dead will be raised imperishable, and we will be changed. For this perishable must put on the imperishable, and this mortal must put on immortality. But when this perishable will have put on the imperishable, and this mortal will have put on immortality, then will come about the saying that is written, Death is swallowed up in victory. O death, where is your victory? O death, where is your sting? And prior to this, in 1 Corinthians 15, it says, how are the dead raised? And with what kind of body do they come? And it continues, you fool, that which you sow does not come to life until it dies? And that which you sow, you do not sow the body which is to be, but a bare grain, perhaps of wheat, or else of something else. But God gives it a body just as he wished, and to each of the seeds a body of its own. And continues a little later, so also is the resurrection of the dead. It is sown a perishable body, it is raised an imperishable body. It is sown in dishonor, it is raised in glory. It is sown in weakness, it is raised in power. It is sown a natural body, it is raised a spiritual body. If there is a natural body, there is also a spiritual body. And so our physical bodies are sown by dying, but then they are raised to be a spiritual body of the exact same sort that Jesus Christ had at the resurrection, where his mortal physical body, just like we have, was sown into the ground, or tomb in his case, in death, but then resurrected, raised, and transformed with his resurrection body, more spiritual type of body, and we will have the same thing happen to us, or we shall not all die, we shall not all sleep, but we shall all be changed while still alive and awake, to where the bodies of physical bodies we currently have will be transformed, they will be changed to become a spiritual body exactly like Jesus Christ had. He was resurrected from the dead. Okay, so that is the truth of it, and the first resurrection is an event that happens in the future. Now, in the meantime, our souls may wait with God. Some say they wait in sleep. Some say they wait, at least the souls of the martyrs wait at the altar. That's reflected in Revelation. Either of those interpretations you could validly argue. However, what you cannot validly argue, and is not biblical, it contradicts the Bible, is what Chuck Smith teaches. So let's get into that in his own words.
So it was a new body that had similarities and yet dissimilarities to the present body. But he will release my spirit from this body. And at that point, my spirit will move into a new body. Paul will describe that to us in the second letter to the Corinthians, chapter 5. We'll be getting there in a month or two. And we will discover how that death to the child of God is a transition, a metamorphosis, a change of body where we move out of the tent and into the house, the building of God not made with hands, that's eternal in the heavens. But the Bible basically teaches that the real me is not this body. The real me is spirit. That this body is just a tent in which I am dwelling for a short period of time.
Right now, the first resurrection is a process over a period of time. It began with Jesus Christ. He is the first fruits. And it continues as each child of God, living and believing in Jesus Christ, as they fall asleep in Christ, the first resurrection continues. It will be completed when all of the martyred saints from the tribulation period have been fulfilled and enter the heavenly realm. That will complete the first resurrection. Jesus said, in my Father's house are many mansions. I'm going to prepare one for you. He's talking about that new body that he's gone to prepare for you. Glorious new mansion my Spirit's going to move into. For there is a natural body, it will be planted in the ground, but there is also a spiritual body, and I have a new body waiting for me. He's talking about the new body that I have. God has prepared a new body for me. A building of God, not made with hands, eternal in the heavens. So then, we who are in this body do groan, earnestly desiring to move out of them. Not that I would be an unembodied spirit, but I want to move into that new building, that new body. I want to be clothed upon with that new body which is from heaven. For I know that as long as I'm living in this body, as long as Chuck is living in his old body, I am absent from the Lord, but I would choose rather to be absent from this body and to be present with the Lord in that new body.
Well, there you have it, people. Out of the mouth of Chuck Smith, after reviewing Gnosticism and their doctrine of resurrection, and after reviewing the Jehovah's Witnesses' doctrine of resurrection, and Chuck's own words and his doctrine of resurrection, I am having a very difficult time telling the difference. I think that any Bible-believing Christian, it is incumbent upon them to challenge Chuck Smith on this issue. He is clearly teaching something that is heresy and should be called out. The issue of resurrection and the resurrection of not only the saints, but obviously of Jesus Christ, our Messiah, is a foundational truth that we cannot compromise on, or we're teaching a different Jesus. Clearly, Gnosticism was determined to be heretical by our early church fathers, and it was dismissed and is outside the lines of Christian orthodoxy. And I challenge any Bible-believing Christian out there, and there are many who I know who embrace Chuck Smith and Calvary Chapel, to really take a hard look at this issue. We ignore child abuse. We ignore child molestation in Camp Calvary Chapel. We ignore corruption and lying and adultery and all kinds of other heinous sins. And that doesn't rise to the level of actionable, because Chuck Smith and Calvary Chapel, they're good Bible teachers. Well, on the doctrine of resurrection, Chuck Smith is not a good Bible teacher. He is clearly off the reservation and is as heretical and Gnostic as any quote-unquote emergent or any other person you can hurl a stone at regarding issues of Gnosticism and mysticism. So take a good hard look, be consistent, and call a spade here, people.
As off a YouTube video, I thought I'd just let the author speak his piece. Thanks to him for making that available online, these tapes of Chuck's sermons. This is a really serious issue. Essential doctrines, I think you can get the idea from that, and I just wanted to add that when Jesus is going to prepare a place for us, and in our Father's house are many mansions, and he's going to prepare a place for us, that is not referring to a new body. That would seem to be referring to the New Jerusalem, to a place in the kingdom of heaven, which moving into will be an event to occur in the future, as will the first resurrection. The first resurrection is not an ongoing process. Our bodies will miraculously be resurrected out of death at the first resurrection in the future. This seems to be even worse than the pagan Catholic doctrines that we would go to heaven or hell, which do not even, as far as I understand, really mess with the resurrection of Jesus Christ. So this is actually worse, because he does go so far as to indicate that Jesus Christ was the first fruits, and so in describing this false resurrection process, so we get a second new body. It's being prepared in heaven rather than the transformation of our current physical mortal bodies. What logically follows is that whatever Chuck Smith is teaching about all of us in regards to resurrection, he's also inferring the same is the case for Jesus Christ and his resurrection. And let's hear some more on that. Actually, let's hear some more in general first.
But he will release my spirit from this body. And at that point, my spirit will move into a new body. Paul will describe that to us in the second letter to the Corinthians, chapter 5. We'll be getting there in a month or two. And we will discover how that death to the child of God is a transition, a metamorphosis, a change of body, where we move out of the tent and into the house, the building of God not made with hands, that's eternal in the heavens.
Okay, so he is definitely describing that we get a new body that's been created afresh and is in heaven, rather than the transformation of our mortal physical bodies, which is what the Bible teaches. So Chuck Smith is clearly contradicting the Bible. And interesting to note there, says, oh, we'll get to the rest of this in a few months. That will explain what the theology he's teaching that contradicts the Bible. I commented on this earlier, that I think verse by verse teaching actually provides a way for people to get brainwashed with false teachings, because the way to learn doctrine, including essential doctrines such as the resurrection, is through topical Bible studies. You need to look at verses all over the Bible in order to understand what it really says on a topic, in order to understand and get doctrine. This verse by verse teaching style, just there, that was an example how you have to wait a few months to get another little piece that's required in order to form the correct doctrine and to see the big picture framework of doctrine of what the Bible is teaching, so you can understand what it says on a particular topic. But these are essential doctrines that have been figured out for a long time. This is part of the Nicene Creed. I'll get some more quotes.
But the Bible basically teaches that the real me is not this body. The real me is spirit. That this body is just a tent in which I am dwelling for a short period of time.
That is nonsense. Well, not essential doctrine. We have a triune nature, a body, soul, and spirit, being made in the image of God, who is Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Jesus Christ, in him dwells the fullness of the Godhead bodily. He was in the beginning with God. He is co-eternal. Though it may be difficult to understand, Jesus Christ is the Word, and in the beginning the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things came into being through him, and apart from him nothing came into being that has come into being. God is eternal, existing outside of time. God created. He made time. These can be difficult concepts to understand. But in the same way that God is three distinct persons and yet one, including Jesus Christ, who is the fullness of the Godhead bodily, we also are body, soul, and spirit. God created Adam as a body, and he breathed spirit. He breathed the breath of life into him, and he became a living soul. That we also, being created in the image of God, have that triune nature, and that a body is part of our own triune nature made in the image of God. As Christians, we do have a born-again spirit, but we also have a soul and body, and we look forward to the redemption of our bodies, to the transformation of our bodies, to the resurrection of our bodies, be spiritual bodies, be exactly like the resurrection body that Jesus Christ had, those respects. The idea that our spirits leave these bodies and then go and enter into a second body in heaven, a different body, while these physical mortal bodies rot and are done away with and exit the story, that is a lie, that is not biblical truth, and that is a very new age Gnostic concept, and that is what Chuck Smith is teaching here. Let's look at some more.
Am I to have this present body through all eternity? If so, I would have been much better off to have died when I was in my 20s.
Now, there are a lot of people that are hoping for some kind of a resurrection of this body in which they're presently living. I'm personally looking for a far superior model. Not a renewing or rejuvenating or whatever of this body. I'm ready to move out of the tent. I'm ready to move into the new house.
Now, he is definitely indicating there is a second body, and that this first mortal physical body we have presently is not going to be the same we have later. We have a different second body. He's definitely saying that.
I see no problem with it. Now, the interesting thing, though, you can foresee a problem if we felt that these bodies that we have are going to be that God was going to resurrect this actual body. As such, because then who would get the eye, But I'm looking for a new body, the building of God not made with hands, eternal in the heavens. So, I think that it's a wonderful thing to do. Yeah.
Okay, so again, he is definitely right there saying, no, it's not a resurrection of this body. Not only that, but he's actually giving someone advice on what to do or not do in the present, morally as a pastor, based off of incorrect doctrine. It's unbiblical. I'm not sure what the context is for that there, but he obviously really does believe this. He's really saying these bodies are not going to be resurrected, that we are getting a new, different second body, and that is very Gnostic and New Age. That whole idea that our spirit leaves this body and goes into a different second body. As the author of that first clip did some commentary said, it's very similar to Gnostics, Jehovah's Witnesses. That's not Christian. That goes against the Nicene Creed. Okay, so now let's look at what Chuck Smith is saying about Jesus Christ's resurrected body in particular. This is essential doctrine of the Christian faith. Okay, so listen to this a couple times.
There is a relationship, there is a tie, there is a mystic relationship between this body and the new body that I will have. Just what it is, I don't know, but I do believe in the resurrection of the dead. Now, Jesus rose and seemed to be in the same body, but in reality, his was a special case, and we need to recognize that.
So what is Chuck Smith saying there? He is adamantly defending that we have a second body, and then he goes to say, it seemed like Jesus was in the same body. So what's the point there? The point is, Chuck Smith is right, we have a second body, even though it seemed like Jesus was in the same body, the first body. we need to recognize that Jesus was a special case. See, this is Chuck Smith defending his second body teaching that contradicts the Bible against biblical truth of what is obvious about Jesus Christ's resurrection, that the body he died in was the first and original body that was then transformed, and he rose in it. There was no second body. He's teaching something unbiblical about the second body, and he is trying to defend it against, despite what is obvious about Jesus Christ's resurrection body in the Bible.
There is a relationship, there is a tie, there is a mystic relationship between this body and the new body that I will have. Just what it is, I don't know, but I do believe in the resurrection of the dead. Now, Jesus rose and seemed to be in the same body, but in reality, his was a special case, and we need to recognize that.
What was the special case? Is he saying Jesus is different than the rest of us will be resurrected? He'll have a second body? No, he's saying Jesus is a special case in that his second body appears to be his first body because of the situation. However, think about it logically. It leaves a big glaring hole. If Jesus Christ seemed to be in the same body, but in fact was in his second body, then what happened to his first body, his physical mortal body? That what is implied here in Chuck Smith's teaching is a denial of the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead. Now we're going to listen to another one, which is up here on calvarychapel.pbworks.com, and they have this titled as Jesus Had a New Body.
So it was a new body that had similarities and yet dissimilarities to the present body.
So he's saying present body. He's probably speaking from the perspective of before the resurrection and then talking about Jesus Christ's new body. Or I don't see why they would have titled it Jesus Had New Body. Supposedly off of tape 8661. Let's listen to the other one again.
There is a relationship, there is a tie, there is a mystic relationship between this body and the new body that I will have. Just what it is, I don't know, but I do believe in the resurrection of the dead. Now, Jesus rose and seemed to be in the same body, but in reality, his was a special case, and we need to recognize that. So it was a new body that had similarities and yet dissimilarities to the present body.
Okay, he's saying Jesus Christ got a new body, and there's a big logical error, big huge flaw in that. So what happened to Jesus Christ's body, which died? As to the so-called mystical relationship there between the present body and the new spiritual body, that would be that the present body gets transformed, and there is no second body. This one is transformed into a new state, but it's still just one body. And in denying that, he makes a major logical contradiction and denies the resurrection of Jesus Christ in his physical body from the dead. That is what is implied or stated in this.
So it was a new body that had similarities and yet dissimilarities to the present body. But he will release my spirit from this body. And at that point, my spirit will move into a new body. Paul will describe that to us in the second letter to the Corinthians, chapter 5. We'll be getting there in a month or two. And we will discover how that death to the child of God is a transition, a metamorphosis, a change of body where we move out of the tent and into the house, the building of God not made with hands, that's eternal in the heavens. But the Bible basically teaches that the real me is not this body. The real me is spirit. That this body is just a tent in which I am dwelling for a short period of time.
Right now, the first resurrection is a process over a period of time. It began with Jesus Christ. He is the first fruits. And it continues as each child of God, living and believing in Jesus Christ, as they fall asleep in Christ, the first resurrection continues. It will be completed when all of the martyred saints from the tribulation period have been fulfilled and enter the heavenly realm. That will complete the first resurrection. Jesus said, in my Father's house are many mansions. I'm going to prepare one for you. He's talking about that new body that he's gone to prepare for you. Glorious new mansion my Spirit's going to move into. For there is a natural body. It will be planted in the ground, but there is also a spiritual body, and I have a new body waiting for me. He's talking about the new body that I have. God has prepared a new body for me. A building of God, not made with hands, eternal in the heavens. So then we who are in this body do groan, earnestly desiring to move out of them. Not that I would be an unembodied spirit, but I want to move into that new building, that new body. I want to be clothed upon with that new body which is from heaven. For I know that as long as I'm living in this body, as long as Chuck is living in his old body, I am absent from the Lord, but I would choose rather to be absent from this body and to be present with the Lord in that new body.
Hey, so I hope that's very clear that he's saying Jesus was the first fruit. First resurrection process, as he is teaching it, is continuing, and it started with Jesus Christ. So by stating that we have a second body, and this started with Jesus Christ, and also he's very clear on this, he's defending that it seemed like Jesus was in the same body, but that's just, he's a special case, but actually there's a second body waiting in the heavens that our spirit leaves to go to, and this first body is just discarded. It's like, no, this is not biblical truth. This denies essential Christian doctrine of the bodily resurrection of Jesus Christ. Okay? Now, how important is this? Well, it's a false Christ, redefining Jesus Christ to not be the Jesus Christ of the Bible. Let's also look at an article from the Christian Research Journal called I Believe in the Resurrection of the Flesh by Norman Geisler on the importance of the resurrection of the flesh. And to quote, "The denial that Christ came in human flesh is called docetism. Hence, the denial that he rose in human flesh is a kind of neo-docetism. Both diminish the full humanity of Christ, one before and the other after his resurrection. A similar doctrinal deviation existed in the first century. John addressed it when he warned against those who deny that Jesus Christ has come and remains in the flesh. 1 John 4:2. The use of the perfect participle has come implies that Jesus came in the flesh in the past and he remained in the flesh when John penned these words after the resurrection. Okay, so what is he saying there? John, using the tense he used, implies both that Jesus came in the flesh in the past, i.e. he was born in the flesh, and also he remained in the flesh as of the time when John wrote that, which was after the resurrection. So the implication of 1 John 4:2, based on the tense used there in the Greek, is that Jesus Christ has come and remains in the flesh. Okay, continuing on. In the parallel passage, 2 John 7, John used the present tense, warning against those who do not acknowledge Jesus Christ as coming in the flesh. This makes it even clearer that John considered it wrong to deny flesh of Christ, either before or after his resurrection. The reason is obvious. Human flesh is part of our true human nature as God created it. Hence, to deny that Christ was resurrected in human flesh is to deprive him of full humanity. But, however, this is also what indicates an Antichrist spirit. Jesus Christ was born in the flesh, he died in the flesh, he was resurrected in the flesh, and he is returning in the flesh is also implied. In 2 John 2, as John used the present tense, warning against those who do not acknowledge Jesus Christ as coming in the flesh. In the present tense, he could be coming at any time in the flesh. He was born, died, rose from the dead, and will return in the flesh. And that's true, his physical mortal body was transformed, was changed to a spiritual resurrection body, but is still one body that was transformed. And we will also have this present body, this one body, be transformed in the resurrection. It will be resurrected. There is a transformation, but there is not a second body. Again, beloved, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits to see whether they are from God, because many false prophets have gone out into the world. By this you know the Spirit of God. Every spirit that confesses that Jesus Christ has come in the flesh is from God, and every spirit that does not confess Jesus is not from God. This is the spirit of the Antichrist, of which you have heard that it is coming, and now it is already in the world. For many deceivers have gone out into the world, those who do not acknowledge Jesus Christ as coming in the flesh. This is the deceiver and the Antichrist. Watch yourself yourselves that you do not lose what we have accomplished, but that you may receive a full reward. Anyone who goes too far and does not abide in the teaching of Christ does not have God, and the one who abides in the teaching, he has both the Father and the Son. If anyone comes to you and does not bring this teaching, do not receive him into your house, and do not give him a greeting, for the one who gives him a greeting participates in his evil deeds. And just on a personal note, I was shocked to find out that this is the case. Do you realize I am shocked to find out this is the case? I mean, I've been to Calvary chapels for months. I've seen them myself. I've seen people talk about Chuck Smith like he's this great man of God, like some perfect example, putting him up on a pedestal and not really even knowing much about it. I realize now that there was some brainwashing going on. I mean, these issues date back to 1997. I mean, this is Antichrist. This shows the influence of an Antichrist spirit that is present, that was present then, and I don't know that this has ever really been corrected. It seems more that it's just been swept under the rug. Actually, I'm rather sure that this has not been corrected, because you can download the sermons. These audio clips were taken from the calvarychapel.com website currently in the C2000 series, C2263 and C2266. And they're also selling this series that contains some of the clips here. Currently, they're through the Bible commentary, the C2000 series, including sets designed for Bible college students. In fact, the C2000 series sermons are what are used for the course descriptions at Calvary Chapel Bible College in the courses that you take there, I believe, for pastoral training. At least the C2000 series are what are mentioned in the course descriptions at calvarychapelbiblecollege.com for study of the New Testament. And this is a major doctrinal error. So I would take it that yes, in fact, they still do stand by this teaching as an organization, as the Calvary Chapel Association, because this is still what's currently being taught. And you can go to their website online and find this yourself. Some of these clips out of those audio sermons. Others are available at calvarychapel.pbworks.com or on YouTube. But when it comes to pointing out this major error in some essential doctrine, it seems like only more recently that anyone's really been putting this out online for people to find to know about this. Breaking news. Chuck Smith teaching things that deny the resurrection, the bodily resurrection of Jesus Christ. I am shocked. And I don't know what is more emotionally shocking about this sort of thing. I don't know if it's really just to find that somebody has taught these things, but what's really emotionally shocking is to realize I have been influenced, I have been emotionally connected to, been around people that are totally believing a lie about Chuck Smith and propagating that lie to others, actually one of many lies, to find out, no, these really aren't loosely associated fellowships in so much as really Chuck Smith is at the top of the pyramid, chairman of the board of the CCOF, through whom all Calvary chapels get their ordination for the senior pastor, and the senior pastor is in the king model over the church. You got a prophet, and then a board, and then you got a bunch of senior pastors in this king model, and it is a pyramid with Chuck Smith at the top of the power structure. What is really shocking to me is that I know people, some people that are in Calvary Chapel. I go on my Facebook and I see posts time to time, and it's like, to people I support Calvary Chapel, it's like none of these people that I see doing this, I think, have any idea about this. Because I haven't. I didn't realize it, so I started studying and researching this thoroughly. I think I first heard about this back in 2008, 2009, and I don't remember anyone stepping forward with this information and telling me about it. It's just everyone seems to accept as okay. So I'm realizing this is more of a breaking news kind of thing for some people like me. Apparently there are other people who have been trying to speak up about these problems, but it hasn't reached into my circles. My circles, Calvary Chapel, this is accepted as okay, or that's just like what people treat it like it is not what it actually is. I think the most shocking part is just the emotional manipulation. You realize there's some brainwashing that's going on. There's innocence or ignorance about acceptance of this Calvary Chapel organization. There's misunderstanding about Chuck Smith. There's misunderstanding. People don't understand the actual authority structure in my circles that I have been in. But no, I don't accept Calvary Chapel as okay, having studied and thoroughly researched about it now. And looking online, it's like there are people commenting on this, saying things that I was not aware of. And somebody somebody asks, is Calvary Chapel a cult? Okay, now they continue on, and they say, for the sake of discussion here, let's assume that a cult means a group with an aberrations in theology or practice which set apart from significant points of historical Christian theology or practice. And then we have this here about the resurrection. Their conclusion is, serious errors in the doctrine of the Trinity and the resurrection of the body are sufficient to declare that Calvary Chapel is a cult in theology. Okay, but then there's an authoritarian structure that contradicts biblical New Testament church structure practice. And cults are authoritarian. Well, is it? Is it a cult? Is it a Christian cult? There are serious problems. We need to teaching a false Jesus Christ that contradicts the Bible, that contradicts essential doctrine, goes against the Nicene Creed. Is Calvary Chapel a Christian cult? If the actual authority structure power model is Chuck Smith at the top of a pyramid, when you have senior pastors that have all the power in these churches, when the board is a front made to seem like a legit board, but in fact it is a mock front board that has no actual real decision-making power because all of the real authority, decision-making power is in the hands of one man, the senior pastor. Is Calvary Chapel a Christian cult? And they certainly do put Chuck Smith on a pedestal. They aren't telling you this. But somebody that's denying the resurrection, the bodily resurrection of Jesus Christ, and teaching something like this, denies essential doctrine, should not be on a pedestal like that. Nobody should, anyway. Is that like a cult leader? Is that a cultic leader who people look to as this leader up on a pedestal, ignoring major flaws like this in essential doctrine? This is denying the bodily resurrection of Jesus Christ. This is denying that Jesus Christ came in the past, in the present, in the future, in the flesh. This is denying that Jesus Christ came in the flesh. There is an Antichrist spirit, the influence of an Antichrist spirit here in this, on Chuck Smith at the top of a pyramid power structure of Calvary Chapel. And someone else says, quote, tragic dangers in sects like Calvary Chapel include ignorance of what the New Testament teaches about church government, self-imposed blindness due to fragmented reading of Scripture, intellectual bigotry, scorning the whole of church history, and the saints gone before. And that's what a comment on kimriddlebarger.squarespace.com says. And this is someone of Christ Reformed Church, Reformed theology, seemingly Protestant church denomination here. And they seem to understand all about it. And they say, regarding the failings and sins of ministers and church leaders at Calvary, that the same things can be found in Reformed and Presbyterian churches. They've seen Reformed ministers commit all kinds of sins. He's seen them arrested and tried. I've seen them fall into adultery. I've seen them do most everything mentioned in the Calvary Chapel article. But I've also witnessed how their churches discipline them. Therefore, this is not a post about how bad they are at Calvary and how much better we, the Reformed Presbyterian churches, are. Rather, this is a post about the importance of biblical church government. And I say there's a reason why the Belgic Confession devotes 6 entire articles to the subject of church government. There's a vast amount of biblical teaching on church government which needs to be summarized and confessed, teaching which once affirmed and confessed will spare God's people from the very thing going on at Calvary. The New Testament devotes a great deal of attention to the subject of what constitutes a true church, as well as who is a true Christian. The New Testament speaks of the universality of the church, as well as the necessity of church membership and the responsibilities of church members. The New Testament carefully describes how the church is to be governed and lists both the duties and qualifications of the officers which govern the church. The New Testament tells us how ministers are to be called and supervised and of what their duties consist. Finally, the New Testament instructs us how our churches are to exercise church discipline over erring members and especially church officers. I know that many people find ecclesiology, the doctrine of the church, boring. I've seen people's eyes glaze over when the topic is even mentioned, but this is an important aspect of biblical teaching and we neglect it to our peril. So for those of you still in Calvary or similar churches, or for those of you struggling to understand how things like this can happen, please realize that the New Testament doesn't blush at the sins of Christians or of Christian leaders. It speaks of such sinners being restored and reconciled after being disciplined. There is clear instruction about how to govern our churches, and what to do when ministers fall into public sin or create scandal. Sadly, that teaching is not found nor practiced at Calvary Chapel. The, quote, Moses model does not reflect the New Testament's teaching about ministers and their accountability to their fellow elders. My advice, please consider the Reformed Confessions and the numerous verses they summarize. There is a way out of this continuing problem: biblical church government.